Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our hub webinar titled White Supremacy, Diet Culture, and the Wellness Industry. If you have not been to one of our webinars before, we just throw together something, hopefully once a month, that lends to your leadership development or just learning things that we think help you better serve your communities. I'm really excited about our speaker today. Her name's Megan Vasquez, and she is the Senior Director of Wellness. I'll let her do a lot more of her introduction. I know she's got some things queued up for her intro, but I will just say personally, I got to work with Megan last year. She was the co-chair of the Equity Experience conference that happened. I don't know if anybody here was able to attend that, but did a fantastic job putting together an experience for folks in Baltimore last year, and has been doing really important work around the topic of this webinar. So extremely excited and personally very thrilled to introduce y'all to our speaker, Megan. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Ellie, and thank you for the kind words. I'm going to start by telling you guys I'm very nervous. So you're going to hear different elevations of my voice. I might go off. I have a script, so I'm going to read from it. So I'll be looking up and down, and I have two computer screens. So if it looks like I'm looking off, that's why. So my name is Megan Vasquez, and I am the Senior Director of Wellness at the North Suburban YMCA in Northbrook, Illinois. I identify as a queer Black woman who is a wellness practitioner that has both been positively and negatively impacted by the industry. I am very passionate about changing the wellness industry from within. The purpose of my presentation is to highlight how diet culture, white supremacy, diet culture, anti-fat bias, and racism are tied to white supremacy culture, and it's upheld through our participation in the wellness industry. Through the research that I've done, my hope today is that I raise your awareness on the many ways that we can unintentionally cause harm in an industry that states we promote better health. And so if you would like any of the resources that I've used and or learned from, please email me and I will send you a list of resources. So before we get started, I want to give everyone a trigger warning. This presentation will discuss the topics of sexual assault, enslavement, and racism. Please feel free to turn your cameras off, walk away from your screen, do whatever you need to keep yourself psychologically safe. Our group agreement. First one is racism exists, and that's really not up for debate. So in this space today, we're not going to discuss whether it does or doesn't exist. No one knows everything. I don't know everything. However, as a group, we know together, we know a lot. This is a learning space. This is a brave space, but it is not, it may not be a safe space. Please be curious, participate the best way you can. And although we won't be having open discussion, please don't play devil's advocate. And the goal is not for you to agree with me today, but just to kind of get a better understanding. Hopefully you will agree with me, but you don't have to. We're going to talk about safety, and you're going to see some parts that have quotations marks around them. And those lines are from the African American Museum. Oh, my thing keeps just doing it by itself. And I don't know why.
Let me know, Megan, if you want me to steer.
Okay. So I got these quotes from the African American Museum, the Smithsonian Museum. So 1, racism is not safe. Yeah, you might need to control it because something's happening. Okay. Racism is not safe. Racism poses a threat for racialized people. It is often white people who do not feel safe in the process. There's a big yellow pointer on my screen, and I don't know who it belongs to.
That's me, Megan.
Okay, perfect. Racism poses a threat for racialized people. It is often white people who do not feel safe in the process of learning about white supremacy and racism. And learning about racism and white supremacy is often done at the detriment of racialized groups and individuals. There will always be conflict, and it is only unsafe when we avoid it. So today we are going to review the definitions of wellness and the 8 dimensions, discuss how racism affects body image, discuss the history of the BMI and how that impacts anti-fat bias. We're going to define diet and white supremacy culture. And then we're going to highlight how white supremacy characteristics show up in the wellness industry. So before we get started, I have a couple questions for you. You guys can write them down. You can think about them. You can throw them in the chat. And the first question I have is, what does wellness mean to you? The second question I have is, have you ever heard of white supremacy culture? And then the last question is, when you hear the term white supremacy culture, do you wonder what it has to do with wellness? All right, we can go on to the next slide. So wellness is the act of practicing healthy habits on a daily basis to attain better physical and mental health outcomes. It's thriving instead of surviving. Wellness is an active process of being aware and making choices that leave you with better holistic health and well-being. People typically engage in wellness activities as a preventative and self-care. So when we think of that definition, does anyone see it as problematic? And if you do, say, you can shake your head yes, you can throw it in the chat box. Thank you, Melissa. All right, so we're going to move on to our dimensions of wellness. And because wellness is thriving instead of surviving, we know that physical health isn't enough just to have good wellness. Wellness is about you as the whole person. Just like we have dimensions of diversity, we also have dimensions of wellness. You guys might have saw this wheel about, I don't want to say a year ago, but a little while ago, there was another webinar on the wellness wheel. So that's where I got this information. So the first part of our wellness wheel is emotional. This is defined as being able to effectively cope with life and creating satisfying relationships and being aware of, accepting, expressing our feelings, and understanding the feelings of others. Then we go into occupational. This dimension recognizes the importance of satisfaction, enrichment, and meaning through your work. I think all of us can understand that one. We work at the Y, we work at a nonprofit. We do this for our own, not for our own meaning, but it gives us meaning. And then we go to intellectual. This recognizes creative abilities and encourages us to expand our knowledge and our skills. From there, we move into environmental. This is fostering positive relationships with planetary health, human actions, choices, and well-being. Financial is our next dimension, and that is just a state of financial well-being. This means you can comfortably pay your bills and expenses, your debts. You are ready for any unexpected financial emergencies, and you're also able to plan for your long-term goals. Social is our next dimension, and that's connecting and engaging with others and our community in meaningful ways. Then we go to our physical dimension, which is caring for the body, sleep, physical activity, good nutrition. This includes managing health conditions or illnesses and seeking medical care as needed. And then our very last dimension is spiritual, having personal values, beliefs, and acting compassionately. When you see wellness wheels, you might see 6 dimensions or 8 dimensions. I chose the 8 dimensions one, but there are other ones out there. And when you look at the dimensions of wellness, we understand that all of these dimensions, understanding all of these dimensions will also help us better understand how racism, diet culture, and anti-fat bias affects our overall well-being. And those things can be reinforced by white supremacy culture. So now we're going to move on to racism and body image. So your body image is how you think and feel about your body. Hopefully, we can all agree how we view our bodies and the way others view our body does affect our overall well-being. Historically, at one point, prior to the 17th century, I don't know what happened.
I'm gonna try to fix something real quick. I think
okay.
I know what's going on. So just Give me a minute, but feel free to continue if you.
I will continue. So at one point prior to the 18th century, skin color was enough to separate Europeans from the humans they enslaved. But getting into the 18th century and after generations of sexual assaulting enslaved women, Europeans needed a new way to separate themselves from people they enslaved and colonized. So Europeans started using body size and weight. They developed racist and pseudo-scientific claims such as they have better self-control, they have the right to govern and manage themselves and others, and they claimed that African people couldn't control their appetites, love food, and were fatter, which has historically and intentionally linked Black people to fatness. When we get to the 19th century, those same racist and pseudo-scientific claims took root in America. Magazines like Harper's Bazaar and Goody's Ladies Book began to publish articles that directly tie fat to African savagery, as well as a form of crime and deformity. Fatness was fundamentally linked to racial and moral inferiority. As new immigrants arrived, anxieties grew among Northwest Europeans, and they wanted to be able to separate themselves from immigrants such as the Celts and the Irish. So then thinness became a sign of racial and class distinction. In an effort to define the ideal of American beauty and thereby sustain white supremacy over immigrants and enslaved Africans, thinness became the index of both racial and class distinction and helped create the stereotype of Black people having less control and being inherently obese. Now, by the 20th century, being fat became as a sign of racial otherness, intellectual inferiority, moral debasement, and this set the stage for the moral panic around fat and so-called obesity epidemic. So we're going to talk about body mass index. And body mass index is one of the ways that we continue to hold up racist and anti-fat practices. The BMI stands for the body mass index and is used by many healthcare professionals, schools, and others to assess an individual standard of health. Your BMI is based on a mathematical formula of your height and your weight divided. Your weight and your height divided. And this has been used for decades to measure an individual's health based on their body size. So it has been proven that the BMI is out of date, it's inaccurate, and it shouldn't be used in healthcare or fitness settings because weight is the only factor that's taken into consideration. So the BMI was developed more than 200 years ago by a Belgian mathematician. So I want you to hear that, by a mathematician, not a doctor, not a healthcare professional, but a mathematician. And his name was Adolphe Jacques, I say his last name wrong, Quetelet. And he was interested in finding out what the average man was. So this started the idea that there were people who were below average and therefore inferior to others. And so in his book, A Treatise on Man and the Development of His Faculties, he states, if the average man were completely determined, we must consider him as the type of perfection, and anything differing from his proportion or condition would constitute deformity or disease or monstrosity. So anyone outside of the average man is deformed, diseased, and monstrous. So with Adolph's number, health and life insurance companies adopted it to replace their height and weight charts. So height and weight charts have been around for a very long time, but they used Adolph. So they were already basing their stats on white men and some white women. So health insurance did use information for some white women, but basically what happened is insurance companies kind of developed what we consider overweight so that they could deny coverage. So it really never had anything to do with health ever. So then we move into 1972, we get Ansel Keys. He's a physiologist and he conducted a larger study on fatness using white Europeans, and he expanded his study to include white American men. And that was rebranded to the body mass index that we use today. So the current BMI cutoffs are based on an ideal that doesn't consider a person's gender or identity or ethnicity or where they come from. The BMI was created by and for white people and especially white men. A higher or lower BMI may be healthier in some genetic groups. The BMI overestimates fatness and health risks for Black people. Meanwhile, it also underestimates health risks for Asians. So that may contribute to underdiagnosis or different conditions. So these are this is not an exhaustive list, but just a few ways that this negative BMI can negatively impact, and there are limitations. Persons with larger BMIs or bodies, they typically get less quality of care, and all their health problems or concerns are minimized to weight issues. A lot of hospitals and doctors don't have the right blood pressure cuffs. They don't have the right tables. They don't have the right tools to work with fat bodies. So a lot of times people are underdiagnosed, undertreated, and underserved. So they're not dying because they're fat. They're dying because they're not getting the care that they need. We build a lot of our public policy and guidelines based on the BMI. I don't know if you guys know, but the American Medical Association, based on BMI, has approved for kids as low as 6 to be put on diet drugs and kids as young as 12 to be able to have weight loss surgeries based on BMI. There are way better predictors of health. BMI does not take into consideration the effects that discrimination, institutionalized racism, and economic inequality have on the overall health of our bodies. So this BMI kind of leads into the next definition, which is our diet culture. So diet culture is a system of beliefs that worships thinness and equates health and moral virtue to it. It is a system of beliefs that it convinces us that a smaller body will make our lives easier and more healthier. And I put healthier in quotes too. Diet culture can cause weight cycling. It can increase the risk of developing heart disease, disordered eating, and other eating disorders. It oppresses people who do not fit that ideal body type. It determines who's considered healthy based on body size. Makes us believe that things considered medically unhealthy are okay in the name of thinness and weight loss. And I will use the example of intermittent fasting. We've all grown up knowing that being anorexic and starving ourselves is not healthy. But when we're doing it in the name of weight loss or health, all of a sudden now it is okay to starve yourself for 6 hours and 8 hours and 16 hours and 24 hours. But no doctor would really, well, they do medically prescribe it now, but in the past that would be considered something unhealthy. You'd go to the doctor, you'd have mental health services for that. And then it also encourages anti-fat bias. It encourages anti-fat bias, which is also linked historically to racism, and also promotes participation in the white supremacy culture. So the wellness industry is worth $72 billion. $72 billion. And really what it does, not completely, I won't say an absolute that it does it, but it diminishes the humanity of fat people by moralizing wellness and demonizing being fat. So demonizing being fat then can lead to anti-fat bias. And this is an umbrella term to describe the attitudes, behaviors, and social systems that specifically marginalize, exclude, underserved, and oppress fat bodies. This applies to individual bigotry and institutional practices. So when I say institutional practices, it is still legal to discriminate against fat. There's no protections for fat bodies when it comes to jobs, the amount of money you make. Fat people typically make way less more money than normal sized bodies. So in a 2019 research study by the Harvard Department of Psychology on the patterns of implicit and explicit attitudes, they found implicit bias on body size is the only form that is still increasing. Explicit bias on body size was found to be decreasing the slowest, and that many people think that our body size is a choice. However, it has been found that there are many different factors that contribute to body size, and that's inequitable food environment, economic injustice, stress, trauma, common health conditions. Medication can cause you to gain weight. And so I'm going to go back to the institutional practices. It is still legal to discriminate against fat people. There's only 2 states out of all 50 that actually have protections, and it's Michigan and New York. They're the only 2 states that have protections for fat people. Fat people can be paid less, not hired. They can lose job promotions. There are no regulations anymore for public spaces. So I'm sure if you've flown within the last year and you are just, I'm short. You guys can't tell, but I'm really short. I'm like 5'1" and I have short little legs. And so when I get on an airplane and I have to sit, my legs actually hurt. I'm 5 feet tall. So can you imagine someone taller than me, a larger body, and the plane seats just keep getting smaller, and there's no more regulations for that. Restaurant chairs get smaller, public bathrooms, clothing stores. Bias and discrimination in the medical field cause many fat people to hold off on getting care or seeing doctors. Their the blood pressure cuffs don't work, tables, chairs, BMIs. They're usually shamed when they go to the doctor. Every medical issue is minimized to lose weight, lose weight, lose weight. And so a lot of times when people are finally diagnosed, their diseases are too far advanced and they don't get the care that they need. Because of anti-fat bias and weight stigma, fat becomes the causation for a lot of things instead of a correlation. Studies conducted with doctors and medical students show that doctors spend less time with fat patients and would prefer not to treat them at all. So as we move from anti-fat bias, we move right into white supremacy culture. So Tima Okun, so this is the person that I got there's an article called White Supremacy Culture Still Here, and it's by Tima Okun. Tima Okun, they defined white supremacy culture as the ways in which the ruling class, elite, or the power elite in the colonies of what has now become the United States uses the pseudoscientific concept of race to create whiteness in a hierarchy of racialized value in order to disconnect and divide white people from other white people, to disconnect and divide us all from the earth, the sun, the wind, the water, the stars, the animals that roam the earth or roamed. It disconnects and divides us, each of us, from ourselves. And the power elite constructed white supremacy, and still does, to define who is fully human and who is not. So basically, it's the explicit to subtle ways that the norms and standards that were chosen by the dominant or white group, and it organizes our work, our institutions, how we see with ourselves, how we see others, how we interact with each other, our time, and the decision we make. Wellness culture is rooted in white supremacy's ideals regarding health, ability, size, gender, age, and beauty. Fitness culture and diet culture are intertwined with both placing blame on the individual for the ways that their body is showing up in the world. So, we're going to go over some of the white supremacy culture characteristics. There are 16 total in Tima's article. I'm not going to highlight all 16 today. I picked the ones that were most closely aligned with wellness culture. So perfectionism. This is the conditioned belief and attitude that we can be perfect based on a standard or set of rules that we did not create, and that we are led to believe will prove our value. You can see this in the wellness industry. You need to have the right look, be perfect, have the right body, the right shape, that a wellness professional has to have a certain look. It separates us into 2 groups. One group is non-disabled. They're thin, they're toned, they're conventionally attractive, they're young, they're cisgender, they're heterosexual, and they are considered appropriately, to engage appropriately in and embody fitness. And the other group, that's the group that consists of marginalized body and identities, and that limits them from accessing wellness. Then we go into either or thinking. This explores the cultural assumption that we can reduce the complexity of life and the nuances of relationships into either or thinking, good or bad, right or wrong. And you see this in the wellness industry when we assign moral roles to food or time spent outside of working out. I teach Group X still, and you wouldn't believe the amount of people I hear on a Monday who say they need to work out because they ate so bad on the weekend. Foods are not good. Foods are not bad. There's not fat or not fat. We all have body fat. We all have different levels of body fat. So that's how we have that either or thinking in the wellness industry. So then we go into defensiveness. Means we have nowhere to air grievances. Focus is placed on protecting power instead of addressing harms, naming intention instead of acknowledging impact. You see this in the wellness industry, but not addressing the harms that can cause health issues. We don't talk about the environment. We don't talk about people not having access to green spaces or food or medical treatment. We promote weight loss as the sole purpose of fitness and working out and how to get better health. So we take the person who said these are the things that need to be done as the power and use those against other people. Worship of the written word. If it's not written down, it is not valued. So you'll see this historically, like when we're talking about history and stuff, whose history we get to learn. It might be the person who knew how to read and write at the time. Oral stories aren't as important. In the wellness industry, this will show up with scientific studies. As time is marching on and they go back and look at the studies that were performed, they're finding errors. They're finding they didn't do the research ethically, but those studies are being used as ways to make public policy, to do BMI report cards in school. So we're using these studies that are now being debunked. We're still using them today. And we're not questioning causation versus correlation. Someone may be fat, and that could be a correlation to their illness, but it may not be the cause of their illness. Paternalism. Those holding power control all the decision making and define the rules. This can be seen as you're an expert because you have a smaller body. People who are thin automatically can tell you how to eat, tell you how to work out, tell you how to lose weight. I will be quite honest with you. When I was in college, I lost a lot of weight. So that made me say, I'm gonna become a personal trainer and a group X instructor because now I've lost weight and I am the expert. And we hear that, we see that a lot where you, just because you lose weight, now you become an expert. Power hoarding. Power is limited and there's only so much in the ground to go around. It's kind of that crabs in a barrel mentality. And I think this also goes back to who's allowed to participate in wellness, who can be trainers, who can be group X, who can be in the room, who can't be in the room. Individualism. The cultural assumption that we can make it on our own without help, pulling ourselves up from our bootstraps. This denies that interdependence for us all. This comes out as the only one. And so in the wellness industry, individual comes out like you must be fat because of something you've done. You have bad health. It's your fault. You're not motivated. You're not getting out of bed. You're not doing this. We make these individual problems instead of collective problems. And the last one on here is right to comfort. Those who have power have a right to emotional and psychological comfort, and people who disrupt that comfort are used as scapegoats and blaming the victim. I can say in general, we see this whenever we talk about racism or white supremacy culture. We usually tend to, I will be quite, I'm biracial, so this right to comfort is very familiar to me because I will always defend white people because of my family, even if they're wrong. So I put their comfort sometimes over my own well-being. This comes out sometimes when people believe that beating up their body is the only way to get a great workout, or we encourage pain, we push past our limits. It could be with using the word fat. Some of you guys might be very uncomfortable right now hearing me repeat fat all the time. But fat people are reclaiming the word to say this is just a general description. It's not morally wrong to be fat. We come in all different bodies. So those are ways that white supremacy culture characteristics can show up in the wellness industry. So what are some ways that we can dismantle white supremacy and diet culture? Learn the history of the BMI. I haven't found a lot of information how body fat percentages become a thing, but I'm still working on it. And then learn about the history of physical activity. You might think it's just we all decided to work out one day, but there's some implications in that also. Research and learn more about the harmful effects of restricting calories, food groups, anti-fat bias, and how social determinants of health have a greater impact on the body and body sizes. stop promoting weight loss, BMI, and body fat percentages. I don't have any charts in my office. We still, I struggle, but we still weigh people. We still give them in bodies, but we do not compare it to charts. This is information for yourself. This is information to you for you to use and determine what you would like to do with it. We know those charts were not made for a vast majority of bodies, races, or gender. So we are kind of setting people up for failure, and we're setting them up to work really hard at something that may not ever be attainable. And then my belief is promote healthy living by encouraging enjoyable movement. Just tell people to move their bodies and have a good time doing it. Like physical activity should not be a burden. It should be fun. And my last one is understand being able to participate in wellness activities is a privilege. A lot of people don't have time, like literally don't have access to space to work out. They don't have time in their day to go to a gym. They may not have a space to walk in. So the fact that some of us even get to do it is a privilege within itself. Learn your biases and reflect on your thoughts. All of this research and stuff, there's lots of reasons it started, but another reason I got here was I took a bias test on fat people, and I was biased against fat people. And I have been working really, really, really hard to get away to confront that bias and learn about it. I do that through listening to podcasts, reading books, reading articles, getting that experience from the people who are living it day to day, and then try to practice empathy for all bodies. So I'm going to go back to our original definition of wellness is the act of practicing healthy habits on a daily basis to attain better physical and mental health outcomes. And I end with, does anyone see why that statement is problematic? And I have one more, a quote. This one is, no system or entity in the West has gone untouched by the damage of colonialism and white supremacy. It gave rise to our healthcare systems, our religious belief systems, educational systems, governments, media institutions, beauty standards, and individual minds have all been tainted by white supremacy. And hopefully after today, you guys will like to join me in trying to dismantle it. And that's my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you so much, Megan. I'm going to stop our recording.